debauchery, sexual liberation, immoral behavior, violence, and total degradation. This is not a complete list of what is promoted not only by new Russian and foreign films and TV series, but also by various programs on television and the internet. There is such an expression. Do you want to destroy a nation? Corrupt her. And first of all, this happens through the younger generation with a fragile or just beginning to develop their psyche. Why today, what was abnormal 3 decades ago, has become an encouraged norm. It's simple. Firstly, the overtone window worked for the future. Secondly, it is much more convenient to manage a morally decayed, shapeless mass than a full-fledged and self-determined healthy society, which has a steely morality and a titanic will, and therefore immunity to the pathogens of decay from within. It is this immunity that we have lost. There are several indicators that a society is not in order, and let's list a few of them. An increase in the number of divorces, immoral crimes, a decrease in the birth rate, a lack of moral guidelines for young people, a lack of a common goal and a creative idea. By the way, the latter is prohibited at the legislative level. From here, in general, it is clear that there is a lobby that benefits from this state of affairs, but the most important thing is how all these Shinnik operations are implemented and what tools are used for this. This is exactly what we will talk about today. And if you think that society can be corrupted only on an intimate level, then immediately forget this delusion. Today we will share the concepts. Debauchery into several component categories: the cult of money, the cult of sex, the cult of selfishness, and the cult of violence. Each of the cults imposes through the normalization of certain models of behavior for different ages, which are broadcast in TV series, films, and programs, while planting false information on the subconscious that not conforming to this model is not normal. Have you ever noticed how you say or do something that you have already seen or heard it somewhere? That's right, it could have been a movie or a TV series, because your brain identifies images from the outside as your personal experience and records them on the subconscious. Cult of money. Perhaps he can be put in first place in this sick race of abnormality of the modern vicious society. Business needs buyers, and in order to create them, there are necessary conditions under which a lot of things will be imposed on people that in reality they do not need to buy. And in order to buy all this later, this brain needs money. Much money. So much money. And who are we? Are we just consumers? That's right, consumers. People are slaves to their things. Thus, conditions are created in society under which wealth becomes one of the main goals. And recently, especially among bloggers, there has been an introduction to luxury as a necessary element of success and happiness of a modern person. Hence, especially among girls, a distributional trigger is formed on a subconscious level, which equates material security with happiness. And social networks play an important role in the formation of such an attitude. After all, there you can follow the beautiful life of your idols, and then switch to your own and be disappointed due to the discrepancy with the false ideal. All this, paradoxically, is happening against the backdrop of a permanent economic crisis, which is being artificially created behind the scenes, which gives rise to a very difficult situation. On the one hand, a person wants a beautiful and rich life, but on the other hand, every time you come to the store, you buy much less goods for the same amount. That is, it becomes more and more difficult to get rich, while this cult continues to be broadcast more and more. And then the person becomes completely disappointed, experiences cognitive dissonance, and for some this can lead to depression. It's clear that not everyone will achieve success, but this model was imposed on everyone. Hence, some and not everything is natural, but many are ready to do very questionable things in order to finally achieve their quasi-happiness and take possession of the desired amounts. Hence the increase in the number of crimes and mental disorders, and many other negative social manifestations. Should this be the case in a healthy society? The answer is no. A healthy society is a single organism that fights for a better life for each other, and not for momentary gain for the selfish purposes of the individual. The next cult we will look at is the cult of sex. Yes, the same one that did not exist in the USSR. This means that there was no such sexual promiscuity and permissiveness in the information space. If something happened somewhere, it was taboo and condemned at the social level. Now turn on the TV and see what's there. Porn actresses are becoming difficult role models. But also as guests on podcasts and even on television shows. A young girl looks at this and thinks, why do I need all this above education? The abundance of intimate scenes and their frankness is not just off the scale, but already frightening. Then there is only porn, which has already, in fact, begun to penetrate into feature films. It seems that there is no need to talk about the widespread number of internet resources with adult content. Today, any student can get instant access to terabytes of pornographic materials. Pornography in any form causes addiction, which not only affects the biochemistry of the brain, but makes a person a puppet of quick dopamine. But in the future it can lead to serious psychopathic pathologies, which we have been observing in crime reports for the last 20 years. We won't even talk about the promotion of non-traditional relationships in TV series, comedy programs, and films, because this requires a separate issue. But oddly enough, it is through humor that the overtone window works most effectively. First a person laughs at something, and then there is no time for laughter, as they say. Let's move on to the cult of selfishness as one of the components, but first, let's clarify something. The development of society is not a random, ephemeral, and random process. This is a completely manageable trend. In order to split societies around the world, the globalists have come a long way. Actually, this is the path of globalization, which will clearly reveal itself to you when analyzing the cult of egoism. So, let's start from far away. Let's go back to the beginning of the 20th century. You have different countries, usually national states, with their own unique culture, traditions, clothing, legends, and way of social life. In Russia, this ended with the advent of Soviet power, when the Russian people were replaced by the Soviet people, mixing everything in a single pot. So the process of globalization, which actively began after the fall of the Soviet Union, was supposed to destroy all signs of states, including cultural, national, without identification itself, connection to traditions and the past. Then the Rockefeller Foundation and others sponsored the feminism movement. The Rockefellers financed women's liberation. We launched all the trash in newspapers and on television. Do you want to know why? He said there were two main reasons. 1. We couldn't tax half the population before this. And secondly, now children are starting to go to school at a very early age. It became easier for them to be brainwashed, but now their families were destroyed. And the apotheosis of the breeding of peoples was to be the ideology of individualism or simply selfishness. Today, many people are quite capable of surviving on their own economically. Women have become strong and independent and are building careers. People mated from each other, so that today you are unlikely to know all your neighbors on the landing. People are disconnected and continue to live in the paradigm of individual consumption and goal setting. Of course, this is not a generalization and there are different cases, but the trend is clear. Now the system is built to create a society of complex loners, who are much easier to manage than a cohesive society, each of the individuals standing behind each other. In pre-revolutionary Russia, people were united by orthodoxy and autocracy. Soviet times made the fairy tale come true, but what now? Will I give myself a new iPhone for the new year? Perhaps the most dangerous cult that we will consider today is the cult of violence. Its propaganda is carried out both in direct and veiled forms, which generally does not change the essence. When was the last time you saw a cartoon without violence? What about the movie? What about the series? By the way, have you ever wondered why various shows on television are called programs? Because these are real programs that are placed on your subconscious and consciousness, usually without your knowledge. Knowledge of these principles is actively used by advertising specialists and various types of marketing specialists. So, imagine that a child who absorbs all this content, even in a comic cartoon form, is actually subjected to the forced formation of destructive behavioral patterns, which will then be activated in his life on a subconscious level. Many blame improper upbringing, but this verdict is worthless if the psychologist does not take into account the influence of the external environment, including the content consumed by the child and his environment. There is no need to talk about those sadistic films for which the Ministry of Culture issues distribution certificates. But think about what percentage of children and adults now can completely calmly watch a sadistic film and eat popcorn. This is already pathological and abnormal, but it's too late to put on the brakes. There are very specific people who are responsible for the moral deformation of entire generations, and so far they have not suffered any retribution for that. One way or another, the cult of violence flourishes and is broadcast everywhere, and everything is done slowly. The extent to which modern film sadists reach has never been seen before. Now you understand that the sophistication of crime reports has specific sources of inspiration, even if not obvious to many. And if in the Middle Ages cruelty was justified by the level of development of society of that time and attempts to survive, then what justifies the violence of the age of high technology? Now you have a real opportunity to take off your rose-colored glasses and see that all these trends are imposed by shadow structures that, through their global financial institutions, control or at least seriously influence the internal politics of most countries of the world, especially the socio-cultural component, which is already almost there are none left.